consolidation under the Khiljis and Tughlaqs. A kingdom as vast as the Delhi Sultanate needed reliable governors and administrators to manage the affairs of the kingdom rather than appointing aristocrats as governors. They favored their special slaves called bandagan. These slaves were very carefully trained since they were to occupy some of the most important offices in the kingdom. The sultans trusted and depended heavily upon them. The Khaljis and Tughlaqs continued to use the bandagan. These bandagan were appointed as generals and governors. The patrons of these people by the Delhi Sultans also shocked many elites. Like the earlier sultans, the Khaljis and Tughlaqs appointed military commanders as governors of territories. These lands were called iqtas. Their holder was called iqtadars or muktis. The duty of the mukti was to lead military campaigns wherever the sultan needed. In return for their services, the muktis collected the revenues as salary. They also paid the soldiers from these revenues. Control over muktis was necessary if they were assigned iqtas for a short period. So accountants were appointed by the state to check the amount of revenue collected by the muktis. The nobles were of Turkish or Afghan origin. Powerful nobles had important positions of governors and commanders. The chief nobles headed various departments. The vizier was the prime minister. He kept a record of revenue and expenditure. The qazi was the king's advisor on religious matters. The Arze Mimalik was overall in charge of army. Under Alauddin, the state brought the collection and assessment of land revenue under its control. The right to the local chiefs to levy taxes were cancelled. They were forced to pay taxes. The sultan's administrators measured the land and kept accounts. There were 3 types of taxes on cultivation called kharaj, which amounted to about 50% of the peasants' produce, on cattle and on houses. Large parts of the subcontinent remained outside the control of Delhi sultans. It was difficult to control distant provinces. Even rulers like Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Tughlaq could force their control in these areas for only a short duration. Now, while we were reading out, I read it in one stretch. I just need to tell you that this heading talks about the administration and consolidation which was done under the Khiljis and the Tughlaqs. Now, the first thing that we need to know at this time is these both the rulers, the Khiljis and the Tughlaqs, they needed reliable governors and administrators. And instead of relying on aristocrats as governors, they more favored for the slaves. Their own slaves, they trusted more. So presently we need to know the meaning of aristocrats. That means the princely born people, the people with a good heritage, rich people. So instead of those people being appointed as governors, the rulers of both the Khalji dynasty and the Tughlaqs, they believed in training their slaves, and they called them the bandagans, and they were very loyal and trusted soldiers, and they proved out when they were given a chance and a post, they proved out to be worthy of their kings. The sultans trusted them and favored them. Then the second jota talks about the Khaljis and Tughlaqs. They continued this policy of appointing bandagans, that is the slaves, and they gave them appointed as governors and generals. That means they gave them high posts as they could be trusted. They did not retaliate, and they could be controlled by the kings efficiently. Then the third jota talks about the appointed military commanders. Now, those military commanders who looked after the military affairs, they were based on the governors. They were the ones who were given the territories to look after. The military commanders were the governors of the territories. Territories means the areas occupied by these Khaljis and the Tughlaqs. So the military commanders looked after the various territories, various areas, and they were the governors appointed there. Now, the term governor is an English word. At that time, instead of governor, the post was known as iqtadars, or the other name is muktis, and they led the military campaigns. That means they were the military generals, they were the military commanders, and their work was to keep a check on the working of the army, and the military campaigns were looked after. Now, to look the working of iqtadars, whether the iqtadars were working efficiently, for them to look over their working were appointed the people called accountants. There were accountants who were looking after the working. The accountants looked after the working of the iqtadars or the muftis that you're talking of. Clear? I repeat here, the iqtadars and muftis, they should work properly, and their working was looked after by the accountants, who kept a proper revenue record, how much was spent, how much was taken, all these records were kept. Then there were various other posts according to the work they did. There was a post called Wazir. He was the prime minister. That means he kept a record of overall revenue and expenditure which was happening in the kingdom. He kept a detailed record of it. Everything was under him, Wazir. In the olden times, the person Wazir was the same as the prime minister. That means he was the primary, the main source of being looking after the affairs. Then there was another post which was Qazi. He was the king's advisor on religious matters. Then there was Arz-e-Malik. He was in charge of the army, the number of soldiers, their working, all this was looked after by Arz-e-Malik. Then in the last paragraph, they talk about Alauddin's economic policy again, where they talk that it was Alauddin who brought the estate collection was done, and assessment of land revenue was all. Both these two things were done and kept under the control of the king. It was not for the local people to look after or the chieftains to look after. It went directly in the hands of the king ruling. Alauddin took over the charge of knowing the collection and the assessment of land. And when in this connection, the number of taxes he took for the 3 headings, we talked about them earlier. And then they are talking in these last 2 paragraphs here, this and this, they're just talking about that the Delhi Sultanate, in spite being too vast, but it did not occupy the whole subcontinent, Indian subcontinent. It could only be confined to the northern parts only. And even if Alauddin and Muhammad bin Tughlaq managed to, after some time, once they moved off from there, they lost the control. So basically it was in the northern part of India, near the Delhi, around the areas near Delhi, that they were able to maintain their supremacy for a longer time. Now, these small dabbas here, Ibn Battuta, he was a traveler. He was a Moroccan traveler who came to India. He assessed the things and wrote on volumes about India. So he was the source of knowledge about what all was happening in the Sultanate period. So it's just about him, a few words. Now this green dabba here is only for your reading. You just need to go through it and know the comparison. We have done these 2 headings like Alauddin Khilji. We have done in details when we were dealing the Khilji dynasty, and we have also done Muhammad bin Tughlaq once we were dealing about him. Then they have also shown a case study here. So in this also they have just repeated the Tughlaq rule in detail, where they talk of Muhammad bin Tughlaq, whose policies were, though he was a philosopher and a great learned man, but his philosophies and things could not be implemented. His visions were not very clear and they were a failure. See, he decided to move his capital to Daulatabad. This we had read earlier. But instead of first moving his offices there, he forcibly moved the entire population of Delhi to the new capital. Now this was a drawback. In this, many people died. Then apart from this, he had to come back again. Then the token currency which he began was a failure. So we have covered this heading also while we were doing the Tughlaqs in detail, and especially Muhammad bin Tughlaq when we were doing the last part, Firoz Shah Tughlaq, where we talk of his various things that he did. The various measures had displeased the ulemas and the nobility. He won over the ulemas by giving them grants of revenue, which gave him political power. He increased the salary of the nobles. He stopped all kinds of harsh punishments. He also lowered the land taxes that Muhammad bin Tughlaq had raised. So it's just a briefing up of what we have done in Firoz Shah Tughlaq. Whatever the jotters that I've given you, only those are to be learnt and read, and it will be used as answers. The rest is just this case study, and the colorful dabbas that are given here are only for your just reading process. So read them once, and see if any particular paragraph you could not understand. Otherwise, we have covered these rulers along with the headings while we were doing them in detail. Now, with this, we come to an end of the chapter, and I would like you all to begin your work with glossary, and these are the words which you will write, and the glossary meanings you will write in detail. Thank you.